Hello. Yeah, hear me? You hear the Glasgow accent? I can actually whip out the Glasgow accent in the UK. I can't do it in San Francisco. It's too unintelligible. So, welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for that beautiful introduction. Who here has heard of consciousness hacking? Hold them high. Who here has heard of the organisation consciousness hacking rather than just the concept? Okay, so most the same. And so I just want to get a quick feel for the room, because obviously this is a very broad area. And so who here is here out of interest in mainly the hacking piece, the technology side? Raise them high. What about the consciousness side, the mindfulness, spirituality? Okay, more are you? Good, that's how I came into this. Okay, good. And what about the blend? Who's obviously interested in this intersection? Who was dragged here by a mindful missus? Or a overly keen husband? Or a funky friend? Okay, my friends too. Well, welcome. So my journey with consciousness hacking started actually back in London about 4 years ago. I was working in the field of investment banking at Morgan Stanley, and I was going home every night listening to Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, Joseph Campbell, some familiar names. And I was also at the same time having these really peak experiences through meditation, through lucid dreaming. And every community that I started to partake in, the meditation community, it was just a little bit too hippy-dippy for my liking. You feel me? There was this new age stuff that didn't really land in my body. My friends might say otherwise, they think I'm very new agey. And so I stumbled across this meetup called Consciousness Hacking London. And believe it or not, this is the second iteration. After the first one didn't really get the momentum to really get a critical mass.
Anthony's here, thank you.
Is that, I don't know, oh, okay. So you launched Consciousness Hacking in London 3 years ago, 4 years ago? Long enough.
He was too ahead of the game. He was too ahead.
And I then moved out to San Francisco. And before I say that, I was saying, what I found in this consciousness hacking community was this perfect blend, this synthesis between the head and the heart, between the left brain and the right brain, the rational and the intuitive. And I moved out to San Francisco to do a master's in philosophy and consciousness, started volunteering for the organization as soon as I moved out there, and then I took over the running of it in January this year. So consciousness hacking, for those of you who aren't aware, is an interdisciplinary global community exploring cutting-edge tools and contexts for healing, awakening, and human flourishing. We have many definitions. We're looking at cutting-edge tools, we're looking at technologies, we're looking at wisdom, and really that has been to our advantage and our disadvantage. It's quite hard to pin down exactly what we stand for, but I think that is the process of an emergent space. And really we have a vision. We have a new vision for technology, whereby it's designed to enhance rather than hinder the experience of being human. We want to see a world where tech is programmed to heal emotional, psychological, and spiritual challenges, rather than exacerbate them. And the way we do this is we host 2 events every month in San Francisco. We host an annual conference called Awakened Futures. Anyone heard of Awakened Futures? We have a speaker from Awakened Futures here tonight, actually. I'll keep his Mendel Kaelin at the back. And we build community and we write content. So really what we're doing is we're building this ecosystem around the vision. I like to say to people, we're doing all the things apart from building the companies around this intersection of tech and human consciousness. So like Tony said, we're around 50 cities globally, and about half of the people who come to our meetups are either working in the consciousness tech space or wanting to work in the consciousness tech space. Then we have spiritual teachers, researchers, and all sorts. So headquartered in San Francisco, and extremely delighted to find London getting a little bit of a catalyst here, because there's so much potential in this space. This space started around 5 years ago by my dear friend Mikey Siegel. That was the curve. We were at the very start of the curve then. We're still in a horizontal curve in terms of where I think this thing will go. I strongly believe this is one of, if not the most important intersections of the 21st century. How humanity is in relationship to exponential technology. So, Mikey came up with this beautiful metaphor that I think is very useful and apt, and it is this. It is that we live in a world with the equivalent of technological fast food. Our phones are like sugar. Our computers like pizzas. And so if you think about this, if you were to be born into a world whereby every single thing that you saw was a pizza and a burger and chips, what would you think food was? You'd think food was ridiculously unhealthy. So one other lens that we want to really propagate is, what if we made technology nourishing? What if tech itself could actually heal us, bring us closer together, and not hinder human progress in the way that it so often does in terms of our human experience? Can I just see, can you see is my head, got a headband? Are we all good? Okay, getting some sunbeam. So if you were to come to a consciousness hacking meetup, here are some of the words and phrases and concepts that we're really speaking of. We're speaking about wisdom innovation, universal tools for transformation. How do we democratize transformation? Spirituality upgraded, heart-based tech designed for well-being, the future of the human mind, inside-out change, science and wisdom, and my favourite one, how do we scale higher states and higher stages of human consciousness? Yep. And so I really invite you all into this question, these two questions. Can tech support us on our paths of wisdom, transformation, and healing? Who here thinks it can? And who here thinks it cannot?
Yes, welcome.
Everything is welcome, yeah. And one of the big issues is that what technology is currently doing to us is it's, I would argue, actually propagating and amplifying trauma. That every time we actually look into our phone for that latest dopamine hit, we're actually trying to escape some moment of our present lived experience. I think technology is masking symptoms of trauma, and we don't know what to do with it. And that doesn't have to be that way. And tonight what I'm going to do is talk slightly about what the innovations that are coming out of Silicon Valley are, what some of the movement is all about, and really give you guys a vision for what could actually become as we move from trauma technology to healing technology. And this is my other question to leave you guys to sit with for the start of this evening is, how good can we get at shifting human consciousness? There's a notion in Buddhism called upaya, which means skillful means. And I used to be very much against technology as these potential skillful means. I thought every time I went on meditation retreats, I was getting away from tech. I was actually coming back much more clear, much more sharp, much more connected to my heart. But there's a way here, and this is what I'm going to speak about tonight. So why the focus on tech? Who here has a meditation practice? Who here is interested in psychedelic science? Who Who here has a meditation practice or psychedelic science and thinks tech is a little bit evil as it currently is? So a lot of people say to us in this space, well, why do we need technology to get back to our humanity? Why do we need technology to heal, for love, for wisdom? Why do we need that? Well, the answer is, maybe you don't, and maybe I don't. But technology has this very, very specific, these very, very specific capacities that do not quite apply to other tools. I can go on a 10-day meditation retreat. You might be able to go on some sort of shamanic ceremony or read Alan Watts until the sun comes up. But what would it look like to actually give people, 7 billion people in this world, access to the same levels of transformation that we have the privilege of getting access to? So this is why tech. We can personalize hardware and software interventions. It is scalable. Think about how many people had a mobile phone in the year 2000. And that was something like 90% of the world. Technology has this exponential capacity to disseminate. We want to invite this hot conversation. What if we disseminated our highest human qualities? Or at least the tech that encourages them. Tech is accessible. Other means of human transformation, like psychedelic science is all the rage right now, that has so many cultural, legal, and potentially health tensions in the culture that means that it's going to be almost impossible to get that stuff to something like Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or somewhere in Africa. Tech doesn't suffer from those same limitations. And then there's abundance. There's also something about getting really good at it. Getting really, really good at transformation. 10 days in a meditation retreat is just not going to happen for a lot of people. But if you're actually able to amplify and augment the transformation process through technology, then suddenly a lot more people have access to these deeper states of healing. So, the way I see this movement playing out is really twofold. Tech is like a black box. And what I want to invite you in here this evening into is thinking about where do we build our tools from? Like what place in ourselves do we build our tools from? And also what tools are we actually building? So on the first piece, we have to understand that every single bias, both individually and culturally, is going to be embedded in our tech design process. So there was a recent study out that showed artificial intelligence facial recognition was almost 100% accurate for white male faces, but 20% lower for black females. Our cultural and our individual biases, which lie dormant in the unconscious psyche, are being programmed into things that are actually navigating and sculpting how we interact with the world. Then there's intentions. Think about it this way. If you are feeling angry or fearful, what kind of tool are you going to create? If you're feeling joy and love, what kind of tool would you want to create? And this other piece is around life itself. Yes, we have to solve for biases. Yes, we have to solve for intentions as we're building these things. Because these aren't conversations people are having at Google or Facebook. They're just getting on with the thing. And this is becoming more and more dangerous as things get exponentially more powerful. But to go to this last point around life itself, our technological design process is extractive. We are actually taking things from the ground, putting them into our products, and then throwing them away in a completely and utterly out of alignment with nature state. The Democratic Republic of Congo, around 6 million people died there in the 90s and early 2000s as a result of civil war. That's a Holocaust. Why was there a Holocaust in Congo? Well, people were fighting over the minerals and the resources that they were going to put into our telephones in the West. So what consciousness hacking is really this reorientation of like, what are we actually doing here? Like, what are us monkeys who think that we have transcended our primal capacities, who think that we have, because we have reason and logic and tech, that somehow we're far superior than we were 80 years ago when there was the last genocide in the West. And look what we're doing to the environment. I did a talk in San Francisco quite recently around the climate collapse, and a lot of people, when they think about collapse, you think collapse is a relatively recent thing, right? Collapse has actually been going on for much longer than you think. It's just been ratcheted up by exponential tech. So we have to really consider in this process, where are we building our technology from what place, from what intentions, and how are we interacting with the Earth? Consciousness hacking is asking all of these questions. But then we also have to ask, okay, what tools are we actually building? Are we building tools, go back one, that are bringing us closer together? Or are we building tools that are setting us further apart? Facebook had this beautiful mission of bringing the whole world together, which it has done on some level, but the unintended consequence of that is utter ideological polarization. Consciousness hacking is asking us to actually build tools that are deepening our humanity, and this is what I'm going to show you. Some of the things that are out there in the market right now. So when I think of some of the tools that are in this consciousness hacking space, these are the kind of like Cohack 101s. Has everyone heard of Headspace, Calm, Muse? So Headspace is this classic meditation app. Calm was the first ever meditation unicorn, valued at over $1 billion earlier last year. And then Muse, which is a biofeedback device for meditation. So you might have struggle getting into meditative headspace, and you think you're doing it all wrong, right? Muse is a biofeedback device that basically gives you easy for me to say, audio and visual sounds. Audio sounds and visual images in order to encourage you to deepen into certain meditative waves. Next one. There are some other tools here. Trip, psychedelic experience in virtual reality. Biopsychonaut Institute. This is neurofeedback meditation retreats. So you go to a meditation retreat, usually you'll sit in silence. This is actually guiding your brainwaves into more coherence in a retreat setting. Then you have something like vagus nerve stimulation. So at the moment, vagus nerve is all the rage in health and physiology right now. And what it's showing is that, what the science is showing is that when we're in our fight-flight responses, our vagus nerve isn't functioning properly. But what we can actually do is we can stimulate the vagus nerve and move people into more relaxed, peaceful states. And I invite you into thinking of the implications. If everybody who's highly traumatized, who in some sort of political battle, had access to a tool that could take them out of fight, flight, and trauma and into rest and relaxation, what the type of implications there would be for society. So those are the Cohack Tools 101. You've probably heard of a few of them. If you've not, then that's the really simple stuff. But really what I'm excited about this movement about is really what is on the horizon. And this is a guy called Jay Sanguinetti who works at the University of Arizona. And does anyone know who the meditation teacher is?
Shinzen.
There you go, you're cheating. This is Shinzen Young, who's a very, very well-known meditation teacher. He's been practicing and teaching for over 40 years. And Shinzen had this idea. And his idea was that he thought there was a specific combination of parts in the brain that were responsible for self-ruminative thinking. You know the voice inside your head that says you're not good enough, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I hate you. The self-ruminative voice, 95% of which is completely useless. He contacted Jay, who's a consciousness researcher, and together they set out on a little bit of a project. And ultrasonic neuromodulation was this project. And it's a really fancy way of saying ultrasound.
But that's a TMS coil.
That's a TMS cord. Yeah, yes, that is a TMS. That picture is TMS. That's the... Wait, the white part?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that is TMS. So the ultrasound is different. The ultrasound is basically the kind of things that you see when you're getting treatment at the hospital. So it's really, really light stimulation. And what Shinzen and Jay found was that after stimulating a very specific part of Shinzen's brain, the ACC anterior cingulate cortex, and two other parts of the brain, Shinzen said it was the most significant intervention he'd ever experienced in his 40 years of meditation. So these tools can be highly, highly, highly powerful for human transformation. Then you have empathy in VR. There was a United Nations project in 2015 where some of the politicians were asked to put on a virtual reality headset and experience what it's like to be a Syrian refugee. And from the reports, the results were pretty outstanding. Can virtual reality actually give us deeper understandings of people's situations? And then there's climate in virtual reality. We're in pretty fragile times. And my sense is a big part of that is because we're not responding to the science. And the reason we're not responding to the science, part of the reason, is that it's only hitting us on a very intellectual level. It's not a felt, embodied experience. There was a study out of Stanford in 2016 that showed one exposure of coral reefs dying in VR can lead to a significant reduction in energy use and an increase in recycling months after the experience. We need to merge ideas and experience in order to get people to change behaviour. This is the promise for climate that we see. Group Flow is a project by Mikey Siegel, which is a collective intelligence device which hooks up 24 people and essentially gets them into heart and brain coherence. So just picture this. Imagine you've got 1,000 people and we're able to measure their physiology and their brain waves, and we're actually able to bring them into collective coherence. This is up and running, and Mikey's been trialling it at Esalen recently. And who has heard of PNSE or fundamental well-being? This is a new way of saying enlightenment or awakening. Now, this isn't a device per se, but I just want to show you, if you haven't heard of it, what some of the latest science is saying in terms of what awakening and transformation actually looks like in the human experience. So, Dr. Jeffrey Martin, who co-founded the TransTech Lab, he started studying enlightenment about 1,200 years ago? Very well did. About 12 years ago, on about 1,200 participants. And over the last 12 years, he's developed an amazing database of people who claim to have woken up. He's calling that in the science persistent non-symbolic experience and now fundamental well-being. And he's developed a 4-month course called Finder's Course, in which 70% of people who do the course are reporting to have transitioned into one of the locations in his continuum of awakening. And so this is the thing about this space. A lot of this stuff around spirituality and awakening is really mystical and mystifying. People think it's never going to happen to me. What the science is showing is that it actually can. And we're curious, how can technology support that? Who here has heard of Sophia the robot? Yeah. So Sophia the robot got citizenship from Saudi Arabia last year. And she's made by a guy called Ben Gertzel at Hanson Robotics. And one of our advisors, Julian Losbridge, came up with this idea. Is it possible to program an artificial intelligence with unconditional love? Anyone get quirky at that idea? Get uncomfortable? So Julia and Ben have set out on this mission to embed love into AI. The thing is that AI doesn't actually have to feel love, but if you are feeling loved by the AI in their presence, this can have really, really significant therapeutic outcomes. And for what I hear from people in the space, is they are really blown away, even in the technology at this stage, for how they feel when interacting with Sophia when she has the software embedded. And then we have nanodelics. So obviously psychedelic science is all the rage right now. But as I mentioned previously, it's going to be very, very hard to break down through some cultural, religious, and geographical boundaries. There are some companies working on the idea that, can we recreate the brainwaves of a psychedelic state using hardware and software and neurofeedback with no drugs at all? And the answer again is we think yes. So none of these interventions are perfect. But for me, like, they're bloody important. Like AI is getting more and more powerful, but how is AI funded predominantly? By military. And so this is how I feel the duality of how this evolution process works, is that as we expand our capacities to do harm, we actually must simultaneously expand our capacities to do good. Not enough people are talking about how technology can do good for humanity in the most fundamental way. That said, this is a severely problematic space. Just out of curiosity, who has resistance to the idea that tech can play this role in love, healing, unconditional love? And I think part of that resistance is actually a very accurate one. I think it's a very intuitive one. These things, these machines that we carry around, we sense are so out of alignment with life's natural rhythms. The way they're being designed, the way they're being used, the way they're being extracted. But it doesn't have to be that way. Some of the problems that we obviously question and invite you to open it up in this space, something like spiritual bypassing. If you had an enlightenment button and you just pressed it, and you went straight to the transcendent, does that not just mitigate any of the actual meaning of what it means to be a spiritual human? Obviously there are all sorts of ethical concerns around manipulation. And then who knows what happens when we actually start to mess with the brain. But I wanted to, so this is just a really brief introduction to this space. I wanted wanted to show you guys what we're up to in San Francisco, what the greater overview of the inputs and the outputs are, what's actually coming out at the forefront of innovation in Silicon Valley. But for me, this is the most important piece. Is that why on earth are we doing this? Well, point one is tech is ubiquitous. So say this differently, if we have a device everywhere in the world that is actually re-traumatizing us, making us addicted, it's basically the equivalent of dropping bags of cocaine in every single community around. Tech is ubiquitous. And if we do not align it with deeper principles, we're screwed. And a very good way to think about this is the second piece here, which is one of Daniel Schmachtenberger's favourite points. As Homo sapiens, right, we began with stones, and we used to kill each other with stones. Back when we were Neanderthals and before that. And then what happened? What did stones turn into? Turn into like knives. And then what did knives turn into? Guns. What did guns turn into? Tanks. Tanks into armies. Armies into intercontinental missiles. And then suddenly, guess what? We created nukes. Humanity in the 20th century developed the capacity to self-extinguish. This has not been a problem until now, because these have been highly, highly regulated. The problem with exponential tech, synthetic biology, cyber terrorism, and robotics is that we are actually decentralizing exponential power. We saw the Iranian drone strikes, ostensibly Iranian drone strikes on Saudi facilities recently. These are drone attacks that took half an hour and they wiped out half of Saudi's oil output. Embedding wisdom and consciousness into our technology is no longer a nice, funky, hippie thing to do. It is an existential imperative. Because this is my fear, is that shit's going to start to break down. And if the 20th century is anything to go by, when shit breaks down and conditions get hard, we humans have a capacity and a tendency towards barbarism. If we have exponential power with linear wisdom, and this power, every man and their dog has access to it, all you need is for one non-state actor to do a bad thing, and the whole species goes extinct. And I call this the existential imperative of wisdom. On a more daily practical level, our minds. 1 in 4 people in the UK has some sort of diagnosable mental health disorder. This is only getting worse. Pharmaceuticals are numbing us to the quality of life. Technology doesn't have to. And so I'm going to leave you with this. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and God-like technology. We cannot have these three things out of alignment ad infinitum. We can't keep playing limbic system amygdala monkey games in the presence of exponential tech. And so my invitation is, the most important synthesis of the 21st century is to merge these deeper human values with technology itself. so that we can heal, so that we can come closer into connection with ourselves and each other, and so that we can avoid some of the catastrophic potentialities that exponential tech might bring. So I'm going to leave it there. This is the start of the London community. We're almost 50 cities around the world. And really what this is we want people to gather and talk about these things. We've had beautiful partnerships emerge from this. We've had beautiful businesses emerge from this space. We need to trust in the collective coherence in the field that if we have the right hearts, minds and guts together in the same place, something more beautiful will emerge. And this is the invitation today, is come into this community, welcome. It's going to happen monthly in London. And thank you. Thank you for coming and feeling the significance of this intersection. Enjoy the rest of the evening.